Part 13. Sky Coffin. Author, Qing Nian Wanbao. Chapter 121. The old man took a puff of dry cigarette and said, "Who are you, Lu Linlong?" I was stunned for a moment and replied, "He is my grandfather." I was a little surprised. I didn't expect that this old man really knew my grandfather. Now that you know my grandfather, the matter of carrying the coffin will be easier. The corners of the old man's mouth raised slightly, revealing a kind smile. "No wonder, you look so much like your grandfather when he was young. Do you know my grandfather?" The old man nodded and said, "More than just acquaintance. It can be said that we are very familiar. My grandfather did not tell me in detail about his previous experiences during his lifetime. So I don't know exactly what my grandfather did when he was young. Boy, how is your grandpa doing now? Is he still in good health?" I let out a long sigh and said, "My grandfather has passed away." "Ah." The old man looked at me in disbelief. "This is impossible. Brother Linlong is so powerful, how could he die?" Through these words of the old man, it is enough to see how good the relationship between him and my grandfather is. However, what the old man said made me very concerned. Is grandpa very powerful? In my impression, my grandfather knew some feng shui, and like other elderly people in the village, he liked to lie on the rocking chair in the yard and bask in the sun. Old man, my grandfather has indeed passed away. I can only repeat the sentence again. The old man looked at the serious expression on my face and finally believed it. He let out a long sigh, and his whole body seemed to have aged a lot in an instant. "Oh, I didn't expect it. I didn't expect that people like Brother Linlong would leave." The old man sighed deeply on the side, looking very decadent. After a while, the old man glanced at me and asked, "Are you here today to ask us to help you carry your coffin?" I nodded and said, "Yes, I really need your help now." The old man motioned for me to continue. I told the old man everything about the three coffins being buried together. But I kept an eye out. Although the person in front of me knows my grandfather, it is impossible for me to give all my trust to him. Because Painted Skin Ghost introduced me here. So I have to be on guard. After listening to my narrative, the old man narrowed his eyes and looked at me carefully. "Boy, you still have something to hide from me." I was shocked. What I just described didn't reveal any flaws. How did this old man know that I hid it from him? The old man stood up, looked at me with a smile, then walked into the back room and took out a few things. When I saw what the old man was holding, I was stunned for a moment. It turned out to be Jingxiao. How could this mahogany sword be in his hand? The old man placed Jingxiao on the table, and then placed 3 talismans next to Jingxiao. "Boy, after seeing these things, you should tell me the truth, right?" The old man looked at me with a smile. I asked with some surprise, "Do you know my master?" The old man nodded and explained, "Master Tianqian has approached me a long time ago and wants me to help carry the coffin. Just like your request, it is also the same as your request. It is also a 3-coffin burial. Last night, Master Tianqian came to the coffin shop in the middle of the night, handed these things to me, and told me to help you." Sky Coffin. Author, Qing Nian Wanbao. Chapter 122. Did Su Tianqian say hello in advance? This is something I didn't expect. But why did she know I would come here? After thinking about it, it makes sense. With Su Tianxuan's strength, he might have thought of the 3-coffin burial method. But before she had time to tell me, what happened last night happened. My heart warms when I think that Su Tianqian came here all night to visit Mr. Wu because of my affairs. I have never doubted Su Tianqian. Just like Grandpa said. I can disbelieve anyone in this world, but I can't disbelieve Su Tianqian. When Mr. Wu saw me standing there in a daze, he laughed and said, "You are just like your grandfather." You are cautious no matter what you do. Hearing Mr. Wu say this, I could only use dry laughter to relieve the embarrassment in my heart. Boy, can you tell me everything this time? Having said that, I have nothing to hide. I told Mr. Wu everything about Qinjiangxing. When Mr. Wu heard the words Qinjiangxing, a trace of shock flashed in his eyes. He put his eyes on Xia 11 and asked, "Is this little girl Qingyang seeing?" I nodded. Mr. Wu took a deep puff of his pipe and said, "This matter is a bit troublesome. This little girl is Qinjiangxing, and the origin of Qinjiangxing has escaped. She and the origin can only live one. What is imprisoned in the sky coffin is the origin of the 9 evils. All the 9 evil spirits in the world are derived from the 9 evil spirits in the sky coffin. But now that all 9 evil spirits have appeared, those extremely evil fates will also appear in this world. As time goes by, Jusha will also find the corresponding host to seize the body. So I have to be strong now to deal with what happens next." Mr. Wu continued, "Even the old man I can't get away from this kind of thing. Burying 3 coffins together in a century-old tomb is considered theft. Theft is a very appropriate word to describe it. The century-old tomb is extremely dangerous, and the ghost knows what kind of existence the owner of the tomb is. To rob someone else's tomb and bury yourself in it is an act that will be punished by God. But now I have no choice." Mr. Wu stood up and said, "It's not impossible if you want us to help you carry the coffin." My eyes lit up. As long as Mr. Wu is willing to agree, the matter will be half successful. But Mr. Wu changed the subject and said, "But you have to do something for me." I quickly asked, "What's going on?" "Help me go to the city god's temple and get a coffin." I agreed without even thinking about it. As long as Mr. Wu can agree to help me carry the coffin, I will do whatever he asks me to do. Because, if the Qingyang star does not enter my life palace, I will not be able to survive. Wu 11. Is this the name of Mr. Wu's grandson? I have to say that she is so delicate and her name is so feminine. Wu 11 walked out of the back room and asked, "What's wrong?" "Grandpa." Mr. Wu said to Wu 11, "Tonight you and Lu Su will go to the city god's temple to get the soul-suppressing coffin." When Wu 11 heard the word soul-suppressing coffin, he was stunned for a moment. He exclaimed, "Holy crap! Old man, you don't have a fever, do you?" With a bang, Mr. Wu raised his pipe and hit Wu 11 hard on the head. "If you don't do anything to me, I'll beat you up." You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Sky Coffin. Author, Qing Nian Wanba. Chapter 123. Wu 11 covered his head and said angrily, "Grandpa, you dare to snatch things from the hands of the city god. Are you crazy? The city god temple and the earth temple are, in folk mythology, official positions in the underworld in the Yang world. Logically speaking, Cheng Huang is the county magistrate and mayor. The earth temple is the village chief, and they are all about keeping order in the underworld and preventing the dead from doing evil. Most of the city gods are famous ministers and heroes who have made great contributions to the local people. It is the god that Chinese folk and Taoists believe in protecting the city. In the past, I would never have believed that there was a city god in this world. But now I am convinced. Taking a coffin from the Cheng Huang temple is tantamount to taking food from a tiger's mouth. Legend has it that black and white are impermanent, and bull-headed and horse-faced men are also the subordinates of the city god. I cannot afford to offend such a being. But for my own life, I have to do it." Mr. Wu glanced at his grandson and said, "If you can't even do this kind of thing, how can I trust you to hand over the coffin shop to you?" When Wu 11 heard this, he was immediately stimulated. He shouted, "Isn't it the city god's temple to get the soul-suppressing coffin? I will get the coffin tonight." Mr. Wu laughed and said, "Since you said so, Grandpa will be waiting for you at home. Wu 11 patted her chest and said vowedly, just keep an eye on me. Seeing this scene, I had to sigh, Ginger is still hotter with age. Mr. Wu was very aware of his grandson's thoughts. Wu 11 glanced at me and said, boy, you go with me tonight. With that said, he angrily entered the back room. Soon night fell. Mr. Wu called Wu 11 and me in front of him. The city god is the god who cuts off evil and eliminates evil and protects the country. He can make rain, stop floods, and control the souls of the dead. If you can meet the city god, you can directly explain your intention to him, and maybe he will agree to your request. Mr. Wu changed the subject and continued, but you must pay attention to the fact that the undead are imprisoned in the city god's temple. Although they cannot leave the city god's temple, it does not mean that they cannot move around in the city god's temple. So this trip is extremely dangerous, so you must pay attention to safety. I nodded. There should be many evil gods and evil spirits in the Chenghuang temple. I just hope you won't encounter them then. Wu 11 used his broken gong voice and shouted from the side, Grandpa, you are so ink. Let's see how I get the soul-suppressing coffin. With that said, he hurried out. Mr. Wu looked at Wu 11's leaving figure and let out a long sigh. He looked at me and said to me, Xiao Su, that grandson of mine is too reckless. You should be there to remind him to avoid causing any trouble. Okay, I get it. Xiao 11 came to me, hesitated for a moment, and said, Lu Su, you must pay attention to safety. I smiled at Xiao 11 and said, don't worry, I will come back safely. After saying that, I also left the coffin shop. For Xiao 11's safety, she will stay in the coffin shop tonight. As long as Mr. Wu is here, that ghost will not come to you easily even if you think about it. Wu 11 was waiting for me outside. When he saw me coming out, he said, wait, if you encounter any danger, stay behind me and I will protect you. I smiled and said, okay. In this way, the two of us walked towards the city god temple. Sky Coffin. Author, Qing Nian Wanbao. Chapter 124. The city god's temple in my city is very large. It is also a famous attraction. The city god enshrined in the city god's temple is only known by his surname Zhang. As for the great achievements, the explanation is not very clear. In short, the person who can become the city god must be an extraordinary character. Soon, Wu 11 and I arrived at the Chenghuang temple. Coming to the street of Chenghuang temple is like entering another world. On both sides of the street, the quaint shops are very charming. The gate of the Chenghuang temple is locked. If you want to enter, you have to climb over the wall. But this is not a problem for Wu 11 and me. Just when we were about to climb over the wall and enter, a woman's voice sounded from behind us. Excuse me, could you please help me? Wu 11 and I froze, and when we turned around, we saw that it was a woman. The woman is very beautiful, with a delicate little face but a devilish figure. She is dressed in a red dress, vaguely revealing her slender legs, which is very eye-catching. Especially the pair of smart eyes, it is not an exaggeration to say that they are like autumn water. Wu 11 was startled by the woman just now. She seemed a little angry at the moment. Without caring that the other person was a woman, she stepped forward and shouted, do you know that scaring people can scare them to death? The woman was stunned on the spot when Wu 11 yelled. She took a step back, looking a little aggrieved. When I saw this scene, the corner of my mouth twitched slightly. This Wu 11's temper was not as explosive as usual. Miss, I'm sorry. I almost burst out laughing when I heard this woman's words. This lady. The corner of Wu 11's mouth twitched slightly, and he continued to yell at the woman, I am a man. A pure man. Do you understand? Don't blame this woman for getting it wrong. When I first met Wu 11, I also recognized him as a woman. and it's pitch dark now, so it's understandable that he can't see clearly. Man. The woman asked in disbelief. Wu 11 nodded seriously and said, "That's right, Mr. Chun, Gaga Chun." During the conversation between the two people, my eyes never left this woman's body. Although this woman is very beautiful, there is something weird about her. I looked at the woman's shadow, slightly stunned, and frowning. I stretched out my hand and pulled Wu 11 to my side. Wu 11 looked at me with some confusion. I winked at him, and Wu 11's doubts became more and more serious. He followed my line of sight and froze on the spot for a moment. This woman has no shadow. That means that this woman is a ghost. The woman tilted her head and looked at Wu 11 and me with some curiosity. She asked, "What's wrong with you two?" I can feel that the female ghost's resentment is not heavy. In other words, she is not a bad ghost, but a lonely ghost wandering here. "What do you want us to do for you?" The female ghost replied, "I want to go home, but I can't remember where my home is." Go home? Is it possible that the female ghost in front of me doesn't know that she is dead? Wu 11 secretly made a gesture towards me. I instantly understood that what he meant was, stop talking nonsense and do this, female ghost. I shook my head at him and activated the power of the ghost seal. In an instant, a cold breath spread from my body. The woman instinctively felt fear. She took a step back and said with some horror, "Why did you become so scary all of a sudden?" Through the woman's words, I have been able to determine that she died not long ago and had not seen any ghosts. Sky Coffin. Author, Qing Nian Wanba. Chapter 125. After Wu 11 felt the change in my aura, he looked at me in surprise. He exclaimed, "Are you a ghost agent?" When she heard the word ghost, the female ghost took a few steps back in fear, her beautiful eyes full of surprise. You are not human." The female ghost screamed at me. I shook my head and said, "I am human, but you are not." The female ghost was trembling all over, and she kept shaking her head. "No. You are not a human. You are a ghost. You are a ghost." I sighed helplessly. It seemed that the female ghost in front of me hadn't realized the fact that she was dead. I stretched out my hand and said, "Let me help you remember how you died." I stepped forward suddenly, stretched out my index finger and touched the female ghost's forehead. A cold light penetrated from my fingertips into the female ghost's eyebrows. The female ghost froze on the spot for an instant, her eyes becoming dull. As an agent of ghosts, it is easy for me to make dead ghosts recall what happened during their lives. The female ghost's eyes kept changing. From surprise at the beginning, to confusion, to panic, and finally to despair. She stretched out her hand and stared blankly at her palm. I'm dead." It seems that the female ghost has recalled her death. I nodded and said, "Yes, you are dead." When the female ghost heard this, she squatted on the ground and cried, hugging her head. I'm only 20 years old this year. How could I die? I still have a lot of things to do." I sighed and said to the female ghost, "Death is inevitable for everyone. Death does not mean the end, it is a new beginning. Reincarnate." The female ghost squatted on the ground to vent her grief. I didn't stop her. After a while, she stood up and asked, "Will I become a pig in the next life?" The corners of my mouth twitched slightly. This was a good question. To be honest, I didn't know. I shook my head. The female ghost continued to ask, "Then can I see my parents again?" I shook my head again. The female ghost continued to ask, "Then can I still go home?" I continued to shake my head. The female ghost asked several questions in succession, all of which she could not answer as a ghost. This is normal. After death, what people think about most is their parents and relatives. The female ghost may have realized that this was no longer possible. The next few questions she asked shocked me. Can I have hot pot again? Can I take my cosmetics with me? Can I take my bad boss with me? She asked a lot of such unique questions, but I was just silent. I really didn't know what these girls were thinking. Seeing that I didn't answer her, she asked with some displeasure, then what can I do now? I slowly uttered 4 words. Reincarnation. The female ghost sighed and said, then take me away. I have to admire the character of the female ghost. 1 second she was still crying, and the next second she became very nervous. I summoned the gates of Hades. The female ghost looked at the dark door, hesitated, and walked in towards the door of the underworld. But something strange happened. The female ghost failed to enter the gate of the underworld smoothly. Instead, he was isolated by an invisible force. Seeing this scene, I frowned instantly. Unable to enter the gates of Hades. That is to say, the female ghost's lifespan has not expired, and the underworld will not accept her. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Sky Coffin. Author, Ching Nian Wanba. Chapter 126. Seeing that she couldn't get in, the female ghost said with some surprise, then I don't have to leave. I didn't say anything and asked, how did you die? He was hit by a car and died 10 minutes ago. 10 minutes. That means that the female ghost is being rescued, but for some unknown reason, her soul left her body. As long as the female ghost can be returned to his body in time, he can survive. Wu 11 on the side obviously realized this. He said to me, we have to put her back into her own body. I also agree. After all, saving one life is better than building a 7-level pagoda. However, matters regarding the city god's temple cannot be delayed either. I pondered for a moment and said, in this way, we will send her back first, and then come back. Wu 11 immediately rejected the decision. No. After 12 o'clock in the afternoon, the city god will return to the temple. It will be difficult to pick up the coffin by then. I asked, didn't your grandfather say that we could discuss it with the city god? Wu 11 looked at me like a fool and said, are you going to discuss it with the city god? I think you are crazy. This soul-suppressing coffin is where the body of the city god is placed. Do you think he will give up his place of residence, you? The soul-suppressing coffin turned out to be where the city god stored his body. This is really hard to do. Negotiation is definitely not possible, only stealing. Logically speaking, the city god's temple is only a place to worship the city god, and the physical body should not be stored under the city god's temple. But there are exceptions. Some of the city god's physical bodies are in the city god's temple, but we don't know where they are. Wu 11 thought for a moment and said, let's do this. I'll take this female ghost back, and you first enter the city god's temple and find the soul-suppressing coffin. I nodded, that was all I could do now. Wu 11 said in his broken voice, follow me. I will bring you back to life. The female ghost quickly followed Wu 11. After Wu 11 left, I was the only one left on the street. I don't know why, but I feel a little nervous. Looking at the gate of the Chenghuang temple, I hesitated whether to go in or not. Because there is a proverb that has always stuck in my mind. One person should not enter the temple, 2 people should not look into the well, 3 people should not hug the tree, and 1 person should not lean on the railing when sitting alone. To put it simply, this sentence means that you must not have the intention to harm others, and you must not have the intention to guard against others. But then I thought about it, I didn't enter through the gate either. It's about climbing over the wall to get in. If someone doesn't enter the temple, it won't work for me. Thinking of this, I was about to climb over the wall when a voice came from behind me again. Young man, what are you doing? This time it was an old man's voice. I turned around and saw an old man wearing a Taoist robe with an immortal air standing behind me. I was shocked. Isn't this the host of the Chenghuang temple? Oops, I was discovered this time. What to do? What to do? I had an idea and said, something happened at home. I went out to relax at night and unknowingly came to the Chenghuang temple. I wanted to go in and ask for help, but the door was closed. So, I had no choice but to climb over the wall and put money into the merit box. I don't know if this Taoist priest can believe this statement. If he doesn't believe it, there's nothing I can do. The Taoist priest looked at me deeply and said, since you really want to seek blessing from the city god, then follow me and enter through the gate. After hearing these words, my heart sank. Sky Coffin. Author, Qing Nian Wanbao. Chapter 127. The Taoist priest in front of me looks sanctimonious, but I don't know what his true nature is. It is not unreasonable to say that one should not enter the temple. In the Tang dynasty, a rich man stayed in a temple at night. The abbot of the temple saw that he had a lot of money, so he killed him for the money. Later, after the government solved the case and captured the murderer, this incident spread among the people and has been passed down to this day. This incident warns the younger generation not to enter the temple alone, because many monks in the temple are unscrupulous people, and they will be ill-willed when they see wealth or sex and lose their lives. Seeing me frozen in place, the Taoist priest asked, "What's wrong?" I quickly said, "No. It's nothing. I was just thinking about whether to reject this Taoist priest. Pretend to leave, then sneak back and climb over the wall. If you think about it carefully, this doesn't make much sense. Because Taoist priests originally lived in the city god's temple. No matter which way you enter, there is a risk of encountering a Taoist priest. If I refuse now, it will most likely arouse the Taoist priest's suspicion. Therefore, I could only enter the Chenghuang temple with the Taoist priest. Entering the Chenghuang temple is like crossing time and space and arriving in ancient times. All the buildings inside are antique. Inside the Chenghuang temple, the apricot yellow courtyard wall, the bluish-gray ridge of the palace, the pale green towering ancient trees, and the 9 colorful mountains look like a peacock spreading its tail, with its gorgeous and charming tail surrounding the peacock's head. There is a reason why this place is a tourist attraction in the city. The scenery here is still very charming. As the Taoist priest walked away, he said, "As long as you are sincere, all your needs can be fulfilled by the city god." I didn't even listen to what the Taoist priest was saying. I kept looking for the strangeness of the Chenghuang temple. The soul-suppressing coffin is located in the Chenghuang temple. If you want to find the soul-suppressing coffin, you must pay attention to the weirdness of the city god's temple. Because it is impossible to put the soul-suppressing coffin on the surface. My eyes were on the ancient well not far away. I was slightly startled, and I actually felt a trace of yin qi there. Could it be that the soul-suppressing coffin is somewhere? Are you listening to me? The Taoist priest's voice suddenly sounded in my ears. I quickly reacted and said, "Listen again." The Taoist priest led me into the city god's temple, where the city god is worshipped. The Chenghuang temple is very big, so if you want to visit, it may take a while. Entering the place dedicated to the city god, you will see a statue of the god. The statues are similar to the statues enshrined in other temples. However, the appearance of the city god was perfectly carved. The city god looks very upright, and his brows are full of awe-inspiring righteousness. The statue alone can give people a sense of coercion and intimidation. The Taoist priest found 3 sticks of incense, put them in my hands, and said, "If you pray sincerely, you will get a response from the city god." I took the 3 sticks of incense from the Taoist priest, then lit them and inserted them into the incense burner. I knelt in front of the statue of the city god and kowtowed 3 times. I didn't come here to beg the city god. It was for the soul-suppressing coffin, but the Taoist priest was watching from the side, so I could only do this. I have to find a way to stay here. Because of this, I can continue to search for the soul-suppressing coffin. But why should I stay here? I suddenly felt that I was being stared at by a pair of eyes. This made my hair stand on end. I slowly raised my head, my pupils dilated and contracted instantly. Because I saw the eyes of the statue moving. Sky Coffin. Author, Qing Nian Wanba. Chapter 128. City God. Live. I quickly rubbed my eyes, but found that the statue of the city god had returned to normal. Could it be that I saw it wrong? At this moment, blue lightning pierced the silent night sky, illuminating the entire city god temple brightly, followed by bursts of thunder. I stood up and frowned. Is it raining? The Taoist priest waved the dust in his hand and came to the door of the main hall, where raindrops fell from the night sky. It took more than 10 seconds to form a splashing momentum. This rain came too suddenly and too strangely. I've paid attention to the weather tonight. The sky is full of stars and cloudless tonight. How could it suddenly rain? The Taoist priest turned his head and said to me, "It's raining heavily and you can't leave. How about staying here for one night?" I was worried that I had no way to stay here, but unexpectedly God gave me an excuse. I said to the Taoist priest, "Thank you, Taoist master." The Taoist priest shook the fly whisk and said with a smile, "It doesn't matter." Then, the Taoist priest led me to a room. "You can rest here." I nodded, and the Taoist priest walked out of the room. Just as the Taoist priest was about to leave the room, he suddenly stopped and said to me, "Don't go out at night. It's not peaceful at night." After that, he left without looking back. After the Taoist priest left, I looked around and looked at the room. The room is not big, but it is antique. Even the bed is the kind used by wealthy families in ancient times. I didn't think too much, but instead thought about the situation I was facing now. I took out my phone and checked the time. It was 10:30, which was still an hour and a half before the city god came back at 12 o'clock. I have to find the soul coffin within this hour and a half, and then contact Wu 11 and ask him to call his grandfather to send a coffin bearer. Carrying the coffin cannot be completed by one person. A minimum of 4 people is required. Mr. Wu asked Wu 11 and I to come here just to find the place where the soul-suppressing coffin is. I had to move quickly. I don't know why, but after entering the room, I couldn't hear the rain outside. Could it be that the sound insulation here is too good? Thinking of this, I came to the window. The windows here are made of paper, which has an ancient charm. I quietly opened the window a crack. But the scene outside left me completely stunned. The cold moonlight shone in the courtyard, and there was no trace of rain. The thunderstorm that was filled with thunder just now disappeared without a trace. I slowly closed the window. Sitting back on the bed, my heart slowly sank. The current situation simply shouldn't be too clear. The thunderstorm just now must have been a deception trick used by the Taoist priests. The Taoist priest's purpose in doing this was to take my life. I couldn't help but feel a little surprised. Unexpectedly, the Taoist priest would dare to do this under the eyes of the city god? Is it possible that Cheng Cheng is not afraid of the punishment from the city god? Fortunately, I kept an open mind and looked at the situation outside, otherwise I would still be kept in the dark by the Taoist priests. I must find a way to protect myself, and I must not let the Taoist priests' conspiracy succeed. Thinking of this, I glanced at the quilt on the bed. I picked up the quilt, straightened it out, and stuffed the pillow inside to create the illusion that someone was sleeping on the bed. But I hid at the door and disappeared. This Taoist priest will definitely attack me. I must attack him before he does it. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Sky Coffin. Author, Ching Nian Wanbo. Chapter 129. I hid quietly behind the door, holding the stool legs that I had removed in my hand. I didn't dare to make any noise, even my breathing was kept very low. 10 minutes passed by, and about 10 minutes passed. I vaguely heard slight footsteps coming from outside the door. The footsteps are very light, and if you don't listen carefully, you can't hear them at all. The Taoist priest is indeed here. The footsteps got closer and closer, and soon they came to the door. The door gently opened a crack, and a pair of cold and vicious eyes came into my eyes. I can see the other person from this angle, but the other person can't see me. Those eyes kept scanning the room. He was making sure I wasn't asleep after all. The Taoist priest was very cautious and watched outside for about 2 minutes. After confirming that there was nothing unusual, he slowly opened the door. He first stepped in with one foot, and then leaned in. At this moment, a ray of cold light burst out from the Taoist priest's hand, stinging my eyes. The Taoist priest actually took a bright machete. Seeing this scene, I couldn't help but feel lucky that I hid here in advance. Otherwise, he will be hacked to death by a Taoist priest. The Taoist priest leaned his whole body through the door. I gripped the stool leg tightly, raised it high, and hit the Taoist priest hard on the back of the head. I heard a bang, and I hit the Taoist priest hard on the head. I have no reservations about this blow. But the Taoist priest slowly turned his head, his eyes full of disbelief. Seeing that one blow failed to knock the Taoist priest unconscious, I added another sap blow. With a bang, the Taoist priest's head was beaten with blood, and he fell heavily to the ground. I didn't dare to stay here any longer, so I threw down the stool legs and ran out. When I got to the yard, I looked up at the sky. Sure enough, the sky was full of stars and the moon was bright. This Taoist priest is indeed insidious. They actually used a trick to deceive me into staying here. No matter that he never expected that he would be plotted by me. This Taoist priest must also know magic. But it doesn't matter if I know magic, it can't stop me from sneak attack on him. I looked at the time, it was 11 o'clock, I had to speed up to find the soul coffin. But where will the soul-suppressing coffin be? I suddenly remembered the ancient well I saw just entering here. I decided to go there first and have a look. The ancient well is under a towering tree. I came to the ancient well and looked into it. It was so dark inside that I couldn't see anything unusual at all. Suddenly, I felt a drop of ice-cold liquid drip onto my hand. I was stunned for a moment and looked at the back of my hand. Because of the darkness, I couldn't see clearly what kind of liquid it was. Could it be dew? I gently wiped the liquid with my right hand, put it under my nose and smelled it. This smell didn't matter, it instantly made me break out in a cold sweat. This is not dew. But blood. Why is there blood here? Tick-tock, tick-tock. Just when I was wondering, I suddenly heard the sound of water drops falling in my ears. I looked up subconsciously. Under the moonlight, a woman's body was hung on a big tree by a bunch of whitelings. The woman's face was pale, her eyes were closed tightly, and her long tongue was hanging out. It looked very scary. I was so frightened by the scene that I backed away. Why is there a hanged woman in the Chenghuang temple? My eyes never left the woman's face from beginning to end. But what happened next almost scared me to the point of screaming. Sky Coffin. Author, Ching Nian Wanbo. Chapter 130. The woman's eyes slowly opened, and her eyeballs bulged out, as if they were going to explode. I quickly distanced myself from the woman. The night wind blew and the leaves rustled. The woman's body swayed in the wind. But within my sight, I actually saw another human foot. I frowned and looked at the whole tree. I was stunned for a moment. Looking around, the whole big tree is densely packed with hanging corpses. And what hung these bodies was actually the slender branches of a big willow tree. These corpses include men and women, old and young, and their death conditions are extremely tragic. But the soul is still in the body. All the hanged men stared straight at me. When the wind blows, these corpses sway with the wind and rub against the leaves, playing a sad music. What exactly is going on? Why are there so many hanged ghosts in the city god's temple? Shouldn't the city god's temple be a place where righteousness lasts forever? I saw pleading in the woman's eyes. She was begging me to save her. I hesitated for a moment and put the hanged female ghost down. The first thing the hanged man did when he was put down was to kneel on the ground and kowtow to me. I asked, "Why are you hanged here?" The hanged ghost raised her head. Her speech was a little slurred because of her long tongue. "Please, the city god, be killed, killed." I frowned. Can I still be killed if I come here to ask for help from the city god? Could it be that the city god is a hypocrite? On the surface, he is a revered city god, but secretly he is doing murder, absorbing yin qi? I continued to ask, "Do you know where the physical body of the city god is?" The hanged ghost didn't know how long he had been hanging here. She might know where the city god's physical body was. As long as the city god's body can be found, the soul-suppressing coffin can also be found. The hanged ghost glanced at the statue in the city god's hall, his eyes filled with fear. She hesitated for a long time without saying a word. She is scared. She is afraid. Don't be afraid, I will send you to reincarnation later. I activated the ghost seal, and the hanged ghost showed surprise in his eyes after realizing that I was a ghost. Not only her, but all the hanged ghosts on the tree began to become restless. The hanged ghost glanced at the city god's hall again. Just. Before he finished speaking, a whiteling appeared out of thin air on the tree and hung the hanged man on the tree again. I can clearly feel that this big tree is absorbing the yin energy from the hanged ghost. I looked at the towering willow tree in front of me and finally understood why it grew so lush. The locust tree belongs to yin, and yin qi is rich in nutrients for it. No one would have thought of it. In the restricted area where people come and go during the day, such a terrifying scene will appear at night. I lowered the hanging ghost again, but as soon as it landed, it was hung up again by a slender willow branch. No matter how many times I tried, I couldn't get the hanged man down. I looked at the trees full of hanged ghosts and let out a long sigh. It seems I can't send these hanged ghosts away. But I also got what I wanted to know. The soul-suppressing coffin is located in the city god's hall. Although the female ghost did not leave the soul-suppressing coffin just now, her eyes said everything. Just when I wanted to leave here, a faint cry came from the ancient well. I hesitated for a moment, then bent down to look at Gujing again.